I want to talk about the idea of the police at the table, right? The cleanup crew. Who's responsible for keeping everyone in check? Just that notion, because I can think back at a time where I was just like playing some games and I'm just like, man, I seem to be the only person keeping this idea in check. So either I haven't done a good enough job at making everyone think that that is an adequate threat, or the other players are happy to just let me keep doing it because I keep doing it and they're spending their own resources. So I remember, so it's an interesting idea, and I want to just chat for a second about that idea. So I have taken that lesson, and I've decided I'm only going to answer one thing until other people answer things.
Yeah, so I think this is all tied into threat assessment, and also, it's threat assessment, right? So, like, I remember one early thing I learned, both from my own play style and also from listening to the Command Zone. Jimmy and Josh had a thing where they talked about this very early on in their show, where it was like, if there's like some huge threat on the board, or if someone's like getting a really good board state, like, you kind of don't need to worry about it until they point it at you, right?
True.
Right? So, like, and I say kind of because it's not always that. That's not always exactly the case, right? But, so I've really, like, leaned a little more into that. I remember specifically one time, and I remember, like, in this one game I was playing, I was like, oh, man, like, that's big threat. I can't let that happen. I can't let that resolve. I'll counter it. There's this other thing. I'll counter that too. And then, like, a little while later. So I'm just using all my counter spells so early. And then I get to the point where I don't have any left, and I throw a few creatures down, but that's not enough to win, and then I lose. So I learned from that experience and from this idea of, like, letting other people do work for you, especially if like the threat isn't pointed at you, to be a little less proactive when it comes to being the person with answers. Not to say you don't need answers, and not to say that you don't ever need to provide those answers, but certainly I will always let other people provide the answers first.
Sure. I mean, but that's what, and so, like, I like this discussion a lot because that's, in theory, that's what everyone is doing, right? Everyone is letting everyone else spend their resources. Like, as soon as someone says, I got a way to deal with this, in my mind, I'm just like, oh, okay, great. Then I'm not going to deal with it ever.
Fantastic.
So almost in a way, never say that. Like one tip would be to never say you have a way to deal with things.
No.
Or at least, like, be a little bit vague about it until you have to. One thing I might suggest, and I'm going to try to, like, adjust my play style towards this, is, like, if the table agrees something needs to be removed, I think that, well, okay, here's where it gets tricky, because everyone wants to be in this spot. Everyone wants to be asked if they can remove something.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, I can remove it, and then you get to negotiate.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. It'll cost you. But if that's the logical move, then logically, no one will ever ask anyone to answer things. So then now no one does politics anymore, and you just wait until they actually swing at you, and then you use your answers as you have to. There's no more, like, it if you were to play this absolutely spiky, no one would ever talk.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mention that, because I just listened to a recent episode of LR where like someone, it's their mailbag episode, and someone asked them a question about multiplayer, and they were like talking about suboptimal plays, and, like, if you're playing like a spike, like, multiplayer is just not the place for you, because the optimal plays are often actually suboptimal plays, and how that's that's like a really weird twist about multiplayer, and that's why they don't play Commander and stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, it's true, right? Like, so I will tell people that I can deal with stuff. It's very difficult to. Here's what you have to do is, and I learned this from playing the Battlestar Galactica video game, not video board game. You have to play as if you had the answer, the same way as if you didn't have the answer. in that you have to both lie and tell the truth kind of at the same time. So when you're in Battlestar, and if you're a Cylon, that means you're like the traitor, you're the bad guy, right? But no one else knows that. And the way to play well as a Cylon is to play the same way you play as a human, right?
Yeah.
So when you're a human, the strategy is to go hard, like win everything like as hard as you can, and like pressure people into, doing the things that they can do in a game. And it's kind of like Commander in that, like, you have a hand of cards, so it's like secret what I can do. Sean's not aware of what I can do. He's only aware of what I tell him I could possibly do, that type of stuff, right? So I learned pretty quickly in that game that if I just play the same way I play as a human, but then like lie about it a little bit, because that's the point of Battlestar Galactica. You have to lie if you're the Cylon. You have to say you're not a Cylon.
Which is why that's hard it's a hard game for
it's
some
a hard
people.
It's a hard game for some people. That. Yeah, exactly. But really, it's like sometimes it's not even really about lying. It's more about just like playing coy, or just like not telling people when you do have stuff like that, right? It's more of that, really. It's more deception than it is. I guess deception and lying are basically the same thing. Anyways, so I try to do the same thing with Commander. I always try to like sometimes I'll say if I have a threat, I have like an answer for something, and I do, and I mean it, and I'm being honest about it. And then sometimes when it's going around the table, and I know there's a big threat out there, and someone asks, who can deal with this? Sometimes I just say like, I don't know. I don't think I can. You know what I mean? Like, I might be able to get something if I draw this card, like this will help, but I'm not telling everyone exactly what's in my hand, obviously. So you kind of have to play it all even, like in a way, but then once in a while actually show up with it, because then people will trust you.
Okay,
it's a weird politics thing. Like, you sometimes have to have it and help out for then later when you want to be sneaky about it.
Yes. So the next question that's on my mind is like, what constitutes a threat where I will ask for help if I don't have it? Where I'm just going to be like, I gotta stop. I can't be too coy here. I need this answered. But again, now that I'm asking the question, I'm realizing it's so context dependent, because I think the most interesting cases are when something is a big threat to you, but not really anyone else. That's the ultimate Jedi mind trick. If you can get someone to deal with something that you cannot deal with, that isn't really a threat to other people, oh my goodness, you're Obi-Wan Kenobi if you could do that.
I don't want to ruin anything from the first episode of Battle of the Brews, but there's a moment where that happens. And I can't place that moment, which means I was duped by it. So I don't even know what you're talking about. You weren't duped by it. You were the one who had something countered that.
Now I know exactly what you're talking about.
Something got countered where I was like, thank God that thing got countered. So
I know it.
Yeah. So
you scoundrel.
Like, I couldn't have countered it, or I didn't want to counter it, but yeah. So anyways, So I mean, and sometimes people will just see things that, like, it's about threat assessment, because some people will think a threat is bigger than it is, and they'll take care of it for you. And sometimes that there's one thing that's a super big threat to you, but sometimes, and I'm like just learning this now, they won't know how much of a threat it is to you. Right? Like they might have something on board that really, really hoses a card you have in your hand, and that card may be like a really key part of your strategy, let's say. But they don't know that it's threatening you that badly. So like they might, like, if it's a creature or something, they might like be okay with trading it for something. They might put it into combat, not knowing that it's actually this crazy, like, key to beating your deck or something. So you can sometimes wait out those types of things, or even proactively get rid of them in like a way where you're not actually spending resources to do it. It's try and keep that in mind. Like, now if they know, that's a different story. Then you got to work and try to get rid of it. But sometimes they don't know, and you're like, oh, he doesn't know that his commander or his creature is turning off my commander or something. You know what I mean? Like,
oh man,
there's usually your commander's public knowledge, so they will know if that's happening. But I'm trying to think. There was one specific reference to this that I think like once like Alistair had something that was totally shutting down my like a token maker or something I had, but he didn't know because it was in my hand, but all I wanted to do was get rid of it. But if I made that too obvious, he would know how valuable that creature was. So I just like played it cool, and then he like ended up like chump blocking with it or whatever it was. I can't even remember, but I remember just being like so happy he did that, and then I could play all these other creatures and then
oh my goodness,
do better.
Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing how deep this goes? Like we're gonna have to move on in a sec, but we could talk about this for hours. I bet
this is definitely like a full show topic for something like that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, but I think a lot of it boils down to threat assessment. I think a lot of it boils down to knowing how cards work within this specific game you're playing. You know,
yeah.
What's it called? You know, a Blightsteel Colossus is a massive threat, but really only if it's coming at you. And I remember that's the specific reference that Jimmy and Josh make in their episode about this. Only when it's coming at you, and then like you might have other answers in your deck that are just like, well, I'm not worried about this, so I'm not going to use my thing on it. Like, let other people deal with threats as like. I don't think you want to be the policeman of a board is what I'm saying.
No,
I don't think you ever want to be that.
That was how this all started. I remember I was just reminiscing about a game where I was like, I was for sure the police. I was handling everything while everyone else just scooped up the rewards and the value from it.
Just played creatures, played some spells, had a good time. Meanwhile, the old cop is over here all mad at the world because he's trying to stop all these terrible crimes from happening.
Guess what? You can't stop all the crimes.
You can't. Look at Batman.
It's a futile...
You can't even stop them all.
You can't do it. So the best thing to do is accept that some of these things are going to be threats, and you can't answer all of them. So don't try. Just hope someone else can answer them too.
But you do need to have the ability to answer them. That's the tricky part of it.
That's my point. That's my point.
Yeah.
You have ways to answer everything, but not on a 1-for-1 basis. Like you cannot answer every threat with like nonstop.
Yep, absolutely. And just quickly before we move on, it's like I see people talk about like toolbox decks a lot, and like toolbox decks will be a way to like tutor for creatures and stuff like that, and make sure that you have certain spells at certain times, the times when you need them. But that kind of deck never really appealed to me because I think because of these reasons. I'm like, I don't want to be the person who's like, oh, I got to pull out the thing that stops, their ETB abilities. I got to be the guy who does this. I got to be the guy who does that. And it's like, that also puts a target on your back though by the people that you're shutting down.
Also, this is another reason I'm against tutors. A, for the budget, and B, because I already don't want to be the deck police of the table. Now I'm going to spend 2 cards to be deck police. I'm going to spend this tutor to get this enchantment exile card so that I can get rid of this aura shard so everyone can keep playing. It's like, I don't want to, like, that's too much police. That's too much police.
My favorite thing is when someone plays a card, and again, I don't want to ruin anything from our show, but when someone plays a card like aura shards and you're like, no problem. Like, no problem. Aura shards not a threat to me. Like, no problem. Yeah. Let everyone else expend resources getting rid of that. Yeah. Let the person... Yeah, you might take one of my mana rocks or something like that or whatever, but like really, I'm not a enchantment or artifact heavy deck.
I love it.
Happen to be playing that game, so yeah.
Oh man. Well, let's wrap it up here before we give away too many Battle of the Brews spoilers.
Yeah, I don't want to. But yeah, anyways, there you have it. Like it's you need the answers, but if you're all answers, then you're not being proactive. You got to have a couple questions in there too.
Save a couple.
Have more questions than answers. I think that is actually I think that's just straight up good advice for every Magic deck, to be honest.
Yep.
Control decks might disagree with me on that. But anyways, yeah, there it is.